Hello everyone, Simeon here from the Viewport Unreal team. I'm going to show you the latest developments in this scene, which has been kindly provided by the artist from the Barty Studio. It's a model of a supercar, and I'm going to demonstrate the new features that we just released. So this is the setup. And the first thing I want to show you is the enable viewport rendering. We integrated the result of V-Ray into the Unreal's viewport. This is the setting, and I'm going to start the rendering now. As you can see, we've changed the interface a little bit. I'm not going to be using the denoiser for this demo. And you can see the settings here, a little bit of undersampling for better interactivity, and somewhat a lower noise limit. So that when the rendering, when enough time passes by, we'll see a better result. And there we go. We have the result in the viewport. As you can see, the result of V-Ray swaps right after a few milliseconds. In this case, I've set it to 20 milliseconds, so pretty fast. But as you can see, we can see interactively the viewport in Unreal. I'm going to switch to the V-Ray camera. It also works there. You can see that the exposure has been changed. The tone mapping actually has been changed. This is because I'm using the V-Ray tone mapping, and you can turn it off or on from the enable exposure checkbox. Now the V-Ray tone mapping is more physically accurate. It's not that aggressive, doesn't change the saturation of the colors that much, but it's not the filmic tone mapping that Unreal provides. So the results are going to be different depending on your needs. You can use whatever tone mapping you would like. Also, the settings from the V-Ray physical camera are going to be included in the rendering as well. So this means that the sampling is going to be a bit better. In this case, I'm using the opacity in the. Let me show you here. Yeah, I'm using a translucent shading models with some opacity for a gradient, and I'm going to turn off the translucency because because it gets added from Unreal on top of it. And now I can see the actual floor that has been rendered from V-Ray with all the shadows. Right. Okay, so I'm going to turn off the V-Ray exposure just in order to make the image more contrasty, more saturated. But if you try to work with the tone mapping of Unreal, now you can work with the camera settings. But I also have added post-process volume here and already did some color corrections to the slope and the toe, and as you can see, it increases the contrast quite nicely. One thing I don't particularly like for this in this case is the saturation, so I'm going to adjust that a little bit because to me it feels a bit more oversaturated. Alright, so let's reposition that, have a look at the materials as well. Let's go full screen. As you can see, the viewport, the rendering resolution automatically updates, and some notes about the interactivity. I can change the maximum update time, which is again in milliseconds, and this way increasing that will allow V-Ray to render a couple more passes before displaying the result, and should reduce these the parasitic frames that occur. But Yeah, in this case you can see I've been using a car paint material. This is a car paint from the automotive material pack, automotive materials pack released from Epic Games, and with all the flakes and layers adjusted to create this goldish color. Let's change that, readjust some of the parameters here. I'm going to lower the metallicness, so the metalness, which produces a simpler car paint. I'm using game modes here because otherwise I'm going to see the helper icons in the viewport, so just to let you know. Let's change the color of the paint. Currently I'm using the graphics card that is rendering in the Unreal viewport for v-rendering as well, so some changes in the parameters are a little bit sluggish. Let's reposition this. Okay, I kind of like this. And again, play interactively with the colors, with the parameters. I'm going to bring back the metallic, make it quite black. In this case, because of the oversampling and the size of the flakes, you can see that the flakes are actually visible more dominantly in the V-Ray rendering compared to the Unreal render. This is because the small frequency detail of the texture. I'm going to apply another material here. It takes a bit of time to load up the textures. Okay, there we go. This is yet another material from the automotive materials pack. Okay, let's try and adjust the dome light rotation to get different highlights. And I'm going to actually disable or increase the saturation a little bit more, because this blue paint combined with the blue lighting is actually somewhat dimmer. But yeah, you can feel free explore. The whole idea of this video is to showcase that the integration of the V-Ray frame or the V-Ray rendering within the viewport is quite seamless, or actually works very well in conjunction with all these post-process operators like the bloom, like the color grading, and the tone mapper. All these post effects such as lens effects and chromatic aberration are also supported, so you can go ahead and experiment with those. And you can change lights. As everything, this is the interactive version of V-Ray. Okay, let's give this another. This is actually the headlight, so okay, I have prepared yet another scene. In this case, I want to show you the resolution of this HDRI that we loaded here is somewhat low. We can see that it's a little bit blurry. There are some lines in some straight edges, and this is because when imported in Unreal, it gets shrink down to 4K. Even if I load a somewhat larger texture, like in this case the 16K, pay attention, this is about 400 megabytes of HDRI. This consumes a lot of memory on the graphics card, so make sure that you have more RAM on the graphics card. Now, when I load this, nothing happens. First, because we added a new parameter in the dome light, which by default, which is the texture resolution of the dome light, and by default this is set to 2K. I'm going to increase that slowly. Again, because this eats up a lot of VRAM, so be careful with that. Otherwise, you will run out of RAM and you're going to crash the render. So I'm going to use the 10K in this case, and as you can see now, the texture is crispier. Let's make it full screen so that we can see that. Yeah. So yeah, the texture is there are no jagged edges, and as you can see, compared with the viewport, resolution, which is actually at 1K. V-Ray renders that with 10K. So with this way you can upscale the resolutions of the HDRIs. So if you take a closer look at the right, let's turn off some of the bloom because it kind of blurs the texture even more. Now without the blur, everything is much sharper, and not only the background texture but also the flakes from the car paint. But the bloom makes it a bit more realistic. So I'm going to switch it back. Let's again play around with the parameters. This is yet another automotive material for the tires. Let's change that. This didn't seem too much, but yeah, actually I think nobody uses white tires, so let's change actually the glossiness of this material, or the roughness, I'm sorry. We're using the PBR model here. So with a little bit of roughness, not too much, not too less, we can see we get a somewhat newer, fresh look of the tires. And this is too much, so let's dial it back. Okay. And we try to keep the parity as close as possible. I'm going to increase the max time for the update as well. But as you can see, the parity is quite similar right after V-Ray switches to the rendering. This is not valid for all materials. We are still improving the support for the native materials, but yeah, you just let us know, give it a try, and let us know which ones are not working for you and which ones do you want. I'm going to increase the update time quite a lot, increase the samples as well, to show you how you can utilize this to only display nice images. So I'm going to increase the minimum render pass and to quite large numbers, and the minimum samples per pixel to 16. This means that as soon as V-Ray reaches 16 samples per pixel, only then the viewport is going to be swapped for the V-Ray rendering, which slows down the update, but actually shows you a prettier picture, more cleaner image. And remember, I'm not using the denoiser, so this may be a better case. May work better. So I'm going to reposition again and make sure that we close up on the tire so that I can change the caliper material. I'm going to use this guy. Depending on the complexity of the material, the shader may end up loading a bit faster or a bit slower, but usually takes several seconds to load. Okay, and there we go. So yeah, everything is now ray traced and with the proper shadows and reflections. And again, we can just adjust the parameters interactively and see the result instantaneously. Okay, finally I'm going to reposition that so that we can have a look at the headlight. I'm going to okay, just a little bit like that. I'm going to try and change the appearance of the headlight by manipulating the light there. I'm using a V-Ray rectangular light set into disk mode. This one, okay, and currently it has blue tint. Let's try and turn this off. Yeah, no, actually, I'm going to totally switch it off by setting it to 0. So yeah, now the headlight is completely darker. And the final thing I wanted to show you is that we changed the interface a little bit. As you can see, we added some icons for when VR is in idle mode and rendering, and we also separated the light baking functionality and created a settings window for the light baking. It has 3 presets. It allows you to change the resolution of the atlases. It allows you to set the how the denoiser works, and it also has a dilation parameter. So that's it. I hope you like this new release. Let us know what you think, and as always, thank you very much. Bye bye.